Hi girls and boys, welcome back to Art Mrs. Hack. So we're gonna do a new project today, and it has to do with something that I absolutely love. Carmel apples. I heard it's apple season, and there's a lot of people picking apples right now, and there's a lot of fun things to do with apples and make with apples, and even if you eat a plain apple, it is so delicious. So we are going to be painting our own caramel apples. Let's get started on what you will need to make one of these delicious caramel apples. First I'll have to show you my caramel apple. I just got sprinkles all over my artwork. But this is what a caramel apple looks like. This one has sprinkles all over it for the fall. But they are delicious, and I will be enjoying my caramel apple a little bit later. But this is what we are going to need. We'll need a pencil. We'll need some crayons. We'll need your watercolor paints, your water, your paintbrush, and something to keep under your painting in order to make sure everything stays nice and neat. So we are going to start with a pencil. And to help us out, we're going to put some little guide dots on here. So on our piece of paper, we're holding our paper tall. And in the middle of that paper, I want you to put a little dot. I'm going to make my dot a little bit bigger, but you can make your dot very small, but I want to make sure you can see it. Below that dot, directly below it, but not all the way on the bottom of the paper, we're going to put another dot. And then I can imagine that if there was a very light line here, that we can make a big plus sign in this area. This is where my apple's going to be. So I'm going to put a dot over here and a dot over here. Kind of like north, south, east, west, or west, east in that case. So that we have some guidelines in order to draw our apple to make sure it's nice and big on our paper. We don't want an itty bitty little apple. I know I like really large, juicy caramel apples, so those are the best. So above that dot, that top dot, that middle dot that we put on our paper, we're going to put a dot up here towards the top of our paper that lines up with it, and that's going to be the top of our stick. So it doesn't have to go all the way to the top, but it can go pretty high up on there. So the first thing we're going to do is actually draw our apple, and to draw our apple, we're just going to use a curved lines, because we know all about our lines, one of my favorite elements of art. Draw a curved line in this area, and this is going to be our apple. It doesn't have caramel on it yet, but we'll add some caramel and make it look all delicious and gooey and all that stuff. But at the top of our apple, where we have our stick, we're going to have to include a couple lines in order to reach our stick. So to the right and to the left of that middle dot, I'm going to draw a line that goes up, makes a U-turn, and comes back down. And that stick might be in the middle of the apple a little bit, so eventually I can erase these dots and get rid of them and not have to worry about them being there. Now it's time to add the caramel. So if you remember, we have a line called a wavy line. We're going to draw a wavy line in the middle of our apple, but it's going to be like it's smiling. So it's going to be a curved wavy line that keeps our apple looking round and plump. At the bottom, that caramel usually comes down and it drips down and it makes a little bit of a puddle when it's hot and it's still almost a gel or a liquid form. So I'm going to let that line come down, and it's going to come out here like a little foot, make a more curved line. And we're going to do another wavy line down here. And we'll come down on the other side and make this other little foot here to connect. So now I have my caramel apple, and I can make it a red apple or I can make it a green apple. I'm going to put some kind of connecting lines right here to show that where the stick goes into the apple. So now I'm going to just make sure I can keep the lines that I want to keep, and I'm going to erase the lines that I no longer need. Like I now no longer need this line at the bottom of my apple. So I'm just going to erase that so it doesn't show up in my watercolor paint. Any of the help lines that were there that we no longer need. The dots in the middle of my stick, I probably do not need those anymore, so I can now erase those. And if these other dots are in your way, you can put a little eraser over those as well. So, and if you still can see your plus sign a little bit, hopefully you can't. The lighter you draw, the easier it is to erase. So there is my lovely caramel apple. And I'll add more lines to it in a little while. But right now, first I want to add add a fun tabletop because we don't want our caramel apple to you know, float away on our paper. So I'm going to add a little tabletop here. When I get to this side, I'm going to play leapfrog and jump over my apple, end up on the other side, and I'm going to finish my line so it looks like it connects out there in the background. And then I'm going to come up with a fun background of some sort for my wallpaper. And I did a zigzag line over here that goes from right to left. And maybe you'd like to do something similar, or maybe you want to come up with your own type of wallpaper. So I'm actually going to make my wallpaper a zigzag line, but I'm going to make it go down. So before I did from right to left, this will be kind of from north to south. And my zigzag line does not have to be exact. In fact, I can even add some fun patterns. And when I get to my stick, I kind of jump and play leapfrog and imagine that I was drawing through my stick. So because my wallpaper is behind my stick and behind my apple. So I'm just putting some nice zigzag lines in here. And maybe I'd put some polka dots in there, or hearts, or stars, whatever you'd like to make your wallpaper fun and exciting. And now it is time to add our crayons. So I'm going to take my crayons out, and I'm going to take a couple colors that I'm going to use and need. My crayons are well loved, and I love well loved crayons. No need to use brand new crayons for every project because the old ones work great. First, I'm going to start with just the parts that I know I want to be a certain color, and I want my stick to be brown. Maybe your stick will be brown too. Maybe your stick will be a different color. It might be a yellow stick. It might be a green stick. But I wouldn't choose a color that's the same color as your apple. You want it to be a different color than your apple. My caramel is probably definitely going to be brown because caramel is brown. You probably could look up YouTube videos and see how caramel is made. It is a lot of sugar and it's heated up till it becomes a liquid. And then you can dip things in it. Oh, it's so good on a nice, fresh, crisp apple. So I'm going to outline, and I'm kind of using a lot of pressure on my crayon because I want this to act like a little wall. It's going to help hold the colors into the spots. And remember, if your crayon breaks because you're using it so hard, that's okay. Now you have two. Eventually, my crayons end up in a sandwich baggie. And then I have a whole bag full of crayons that I can use. And some of my favorite crayons don't even have paper on them anymore. And they work just fine. All right, so I'm going to now add some lines to my camera apple. So I'm going to add some nice curved lines and lines that maybe look like the caramel was dripping a little bit as it was poured over this delicious apple dipped in caramel. Oh, makes my mouth water. So we're going to put some little curved lines in there. And if you want on your stick, you can put some straight lines because your stick is made of wood and it probably wasn't dipped or has any dripping wood on it. So we can just put some lines right on your stick if you'd like to. The next thing I'm going to do is decide what kind of apple I have. Now in this one, I have a green apple, like a Granny Smith apple. But maybe you would like your apple to be red. So I'm going to make the second one a red apple because I want to make it look different than the other one. So you have choices. So here's my red crayon, and I'm just tracing my apple lines with the red crayon. Again, making that little wall so that I have some place to paint it in a little later. Now, if you are using brown and red, make sure you use background colors that don't match your apple. You don't want the apple to become camouflaged. You don't want it to match the background. You want it to show up differently. So if I have a red apple, I know I'm not going to use red in my background. In this one, I had a green apple, so I could use red in my background. That is paint and crayon. So since I didn't use green on this at all, I think I'm going to use a little green on my background. And you can use more than one color. So maybe it's green and purple. Maybe it's green and orange. You can have some fun with whatever colors that you think it could be. And I'm going to do a pattern. So again, I'm pressing a little hard with my crayon. I'm not worried about broken crayons. Broken crayons actually are easier to press hard with. Okay, I'm going to do, let's see, green, nothing, because I haven't decided what that other color is going to be. Maybe you can decide for me. I'm kind of feeling the purple. So maybe I'll go back to purple. Purple's a great color for me. And I can make my tabletop any color I want to. Maybe I'll make that purple. Let's see. Here's a nice purple or violet color. This is actually blue violet. That's okay. It's purple-y. It's purple enough. Okay, so I am tracing over all of my crayon lines right here. And don't worry if you can't keep up, because you can always pause this video and you can come up with a plan that you like. Maybe you don't want zigzag lines in the background. Maybe you want wavy lines. Maybe you want crossed lines. Maybe you want curly lines. You can come up with any kind of wallpaper that you want. But this is yet another way that you can practice drawing your lines. And the more that you practice anything in art, the better artist you become. And I want you to be the best artist you can be. Okay, so I think my crayon work is done, so I'm going to put my crayons away and I am ready to paint. So I have my watercolor paints up here. We'll pull my water up here a little closer, and some watercolor paints over here. And remember, you have a mixing tray when it comes with your watercolor paint. So if you want to mix and make new colors, you certainly can. All right, so let's put that here so it's a little easier, and I'll show you if I have to mix any colors. So I have my water down here, my clean water, my recycled water bottle bottom. And my paint. Make sure you're holding your brush correctly. Remember, there's 3 parts of our brush: the bristles, the ferrule, the handle, and we hold our brush like a pencil behind the metal part behind the ferrule. And to activate your watercolors, you're going to need to add some water to whatever color you're going to want to put there. So since I decided on my red apple, I'm going to start there and paint my red apple. And remember, when you paint, I like to use the tip of the brush to get some of the edges first. Don't worry about the lines in the middle that have the crayon on them. And the lines from the edges will help hold the paint in. But if you make a mistake and go over the line, mistakes are the best. Mistakes teach us to maybe paint a little slower, to paint a little more carefully, to paint a little differently, or to come up with a new plan that makes your mistake look like you did it on purpose. And sometimes those are the best mistakes, the ones that make you really think creatively. So I am just petting, like I'm petting a kitten. I'm petting all that paint in the middle to get all that color in there. And if I need more color, I will dip it back into the soup of the paint. And if I have enough color, which it looks like, I think I have enough color here for my red part of my apple. If it's not red enough, I can certainly dip it into my red again and add more red. The water that's already there will help spread that red around. And it's okay if some parts are dark and some parts are light, because if you've ever seen a real apple, some parts are dark and some parts are light on a real apple. So apples are not perfect. They are fruit and they're made by nature, and everything made by nature is perfectly imperfect. So we're going to keep that there. So I'm going to wash my brush off. And now I'm going to take some brown for my stick. Okay, if you want your stick to be yellow, you can make it yellow, but I'm going to use some brown. If you have some white, you can actually mix some brown and some white. Make sure you wash your brush off before you stick that brush in the white, or your white will no longer be white anymore. So I can do a little mixture if I want and put some white over here. It's hard to see the white, but if I mix them together, I get a tan color. And maybe tan is what I really wanted for the stick. And if you just want it brown, that's fine. If you don't have white, you can always just use the brown with a lot of extra water and just use it that way. So again, I'm trying to be very careful around my edges, and I'm painting gently on my paper as if I'm painting a kitten, and the kitten's purring because I'm being so gentle and nice to my painting and my brush. But there we go. There's a nice light brown stick. I'm going to make my Carmel a little darker though, because Carmel usually is a little bit of a deeper brown color. And so just like when I did the inside of my apple, I'm going to go really slowly inside those wavy line areas. Very slowly get that in there and that in there. Here we go. And then once I get those edges all covered, I will be able to fill in the middles. Again, don't worry about making mistakes, and don't worry about painting over top of those crayon lines that are on the inside of your apple, because those will probably shine through the paint once it's dry. Especially if you use your crayon with a little bit of pressure. The wax and the water just don't get along, and so it makes the wax from the crayon shine through the paint. Here we go. I'm almost done. I need some more paint though. So again, a little water, make some soup. Let me come over here to this side. Still holding my brush correctly, always checking. Okay, I'm going to use the tip of my brush. Whether you have a round brush like I do, it may not have as long a handle, but that's okay. Or you have a flat brush, just use a corner of a flat brush for little areas. And then just add the paint. I'm painting a little faster right now just to make sure that you have time to see the rest of this painting. There we go. Ah, that looks delicious. It's making my tummy growl. I think I want to eat my caramel apple right now, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to make sure that it's the right time, not too late at night. Maybe I'll save it for dessert after dinner. Okay. So now I'm going to use some colors up top that look different, or even in your bottom area, you can choose some colors that look a little different. I used yellow. I kind of like yellow on the bottom because it's really different than the brown. Okay, so maybe I'll use a version of yellow, or maybe, in this case, I think I'll use this light orange. I can make a light orange or a peach color just by mixing some white with it, but I'm going to actually use the color the way it is because it's a really nice, bright, happy color. And again, I have a mat under this, so I have protected my surface so my mom and dad won't get mad if I get some paint on this tabletop, because I can use a baby wipe and wipe it up. Or you might have some newspaper or some scrap paper underneath it, or a bunch of paper towels, whatever it takes to make sure that your workspace is nice and neat, because that makes cleanup much nicer and much easier, so you can make more art. Since I paint a lot, I tend to like having their little rubber mat under there so that I can just wipe it off with a little wet paper towel. So I'm going to make sure I paint right to the edges and right off the edges of my project. Again, I'm going more slowly around my Carmel part of my apple so my paint doesn't overlap those areas. And I'm petting the cat when I get to the middle. All right. Very simple, easy does it, little painting there. There we go. So that's all filled in now. Now I'm going to do my wallpaper, and maybe I want my wallpaper to have more than one color in it. And since I use green and purple, maybe I'll try green and purple. So, and I can use whichever green that I want, or I can mix my green and make it a slightly different green. If I mix blue and green together, I'll get a teal. And that might be interesting to use. But I think I'm going to use the green that's right in my palette, and I am going to paint some of my zigzag lines with the green and in between the green and the purple. And you notice I'm doing the edges first because I want to make sure that I have full control over where my paint goes. Okay, so I kind of do my edges. I leave the middle for last since I'm going to get to it in just a moment, so it's not going to be too dry. Here we go. One more little zig and zag over here. It's a great way to practice your control of using a paintbrush. Now I just paint the kitten and push my paint around there and fill up all my space. Now I'm ready for another one. Instead of changing colors and doing each color one at a time, I'm going to do all of the green ones first. I might even decide to keep my white areas white, and I can have a white and green background as my wallpaper. Or maybe you're going to choose a different color than you originally chose. So even though I chose purple as my crayon color, maybe I'll change my mind and not use purple. Maybe I'll find a different color that I like, but probably not, because I like purple. Purple's a good color. It's a fun color to say purple. Purple. Okay, so I'm filling this in. And I need more paint. Remember, you have to mix some water, make some soup, add more paint, fill in those spaces. There we are. Okay, last section for the green. You're probably painting beautifully as well. Again, if I'm going too fast for you on any of this and you want to make it your own, please make it your own. Mine is just one apple out of the many apples that can be painted. So there we go. We're just going to fix up some of these lines a little bit so that it's all the same color green. Alrighty, I'm going to change my brush color again, and now I'm going to go for one of these purples. I think I'm going to go for this blue purple that's on the opposite side of my paint palette. So it's got a little bit of an indigo look to it. And you guys remember indigo from Roy G. Biv. Indigo is that bluish purple color. So I just happen to have a palette that has it already in there. So I figured I will just use it the way it is. And if you don't have it, you can make it just by mixing blue and purple together. And you will get an indigo. So there we are, and you can see I'm being more careful about my edges of my zigzag line. You can use a smaller brush if you have one. My brush is pretty big. Probably a little too big for what I'm painting here, but that's all right because I will just be extra careful. Oh, I'm near the stick, so I want to make sure I don't paint my stick purple. I want to keep my stick the same color it is already, and that's why that little crayon border is so important, so that I don't accidentally paint my stick. All right. This is definitely going to be frameable, and yours too. Look good on your refrigerator. It'll look even better in a little frame. Hang it on your wall, have your own little art show. Those are the best. Maybe even make a digital art show. Send a digital copy to Grandma who may live far away. And she can either print it out and hang it on her wall, or just maybe she saves it as her screensaver on her cell phone. Shows all the other grandmas and says, hey, look, here is my very talented grandchild's artwork. Or maybe you send it to an aunt and uncle. They like those things too. So I have one more purple piece to add. Now, if I wanted to add sprinkles to my my project here, I could. I can wait for the brown area to dry, and I have a couple of choices. A couple of choices could include adding and gluing on real sprinkles. Yes, real sprinkles. Oh, that would be cool. Or I can use a different kind of paint when it's all dry and make sure it's a pretty solid color, and I can paint those sprinkles in. Or I can use my crayons and draw right on top there. Especially if they're the construction paper crayons, they will draw nicely on the dark paint. Or you can use markers and see if some of your markers would work and draw some sprinkles down there if you want your caramel apple to look similar to my caramel apple that had all the sprinkles on it. All right. I'm not worried about the fact that this line is a little darker than the other ones. I kind of like when things look like they were actually painted, because guess what? It was actually painted. So I think I love my caramel apple. Maybe I will find some white paint when this dries and put a little shiny mark on my red, if you have white paint. If you don't have white paint, just put a little line there. There we go. Little line here to show that there's some shiny marks. You could do that if you'd like to. I didn't do that on my other one, but it'll show some shiny marks on your apple to have some fun with it. There we are. And it looks delicious. So whether you have a green apple or a red apple, they're both going to look great. And happy painting. I hope you guys have a great time with this project. Bye, guys.